Blog Talk Radio.
All my life and the hereafter, I've never seen anyone like you. You're a knife, sharp and deadly, and it's me that you cut into. But I don't mind. In fact, I like it. Though terrified, turned on to get a view. She's a monster. She's a monster. She's a monster.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Paranormal Guys Inc. Radio. I'm your host, Jason Pepper, and tonight I got a great show with a great guest. He's another guest that I've been kind of hunting down myself. Supposed to have him on last year, but some really unfortunate events took place, and he wasn't able to come on. But without further ado, we'll get him on as soon as possible. But before we do that, just want to say happy July 4th tomorrow to all the American friends down there who are going to be celebrating, and hope everything is safe and enjoyable for yourself. But let's get this show underway and bring Ken in. Hello, Ken, are you there, sir?
I am. Good evening, Jason.
How are you tonight?
I'm terrific. How are you doing?
I'm absolutely awesome, and I really appreciate you coming on. I know I harassed the heck out of you last year, and I kept bugging you, and there were some things that took place, and I hope everything's better on that end, and I hope everything's great with you, sir.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, I appreciate that. Things are much better now, and I appreciate you being so patient with me, Jason, but it is an honor to be here, definitely.
Well, thank you very much, and the honor is equal, and I appreciate everything that you do and all the work that you put in behind researching these strange animals and creatures and monsters that are out there, and if we can get a little background for the people there who may be new to the subject, it's not just Bigfoot that you research, it's a wide variety, and if you can give, from the start to the beginning, and then we'll get to where you're currently at now with your research, if you would like.
Oh, wow. Well, that's kind of a tall order, but I'm sure most of your listeners are familiar with the term cryptozoology. That is kind of my field of specialization, I guess. And cryptozoology is, derived from the Latin words crypto, which means hidden, and of course zoology, which relates to animals. So, in fact, what we're discussing or looking for is evidence of animals that have not been classified by science, that are not accepted as, real viable animal species. And of course, the more exotic of these and more fascinating in the public eye are Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster and other lake monsters, sea serpents, the Yeti, in recent years the Chupacabras, which is one thing I study, as well as the Mothman, have gained quite a bit of notoriety. Now in terms of traditional science, of course, they reject a lot of what we look for in the field of cryptozoology, and there's different types of approaches to the research. I mean, there are certainly researchers in the field that are more skeptical, that are more scientific, and then there's researchers like myself that think a little bit outside the box. But I still try to apply the same types of methodologies that most scientists do, as far as approaching things with a scientific process, gathering information, analyzing it, testing it, and so forth. So
that's a great point. What sort of scientific background would you need? Can you be a basic, like a layman, and get into this? Because there are a bunch of amateur Bigfoot groups who are doing outstanding work, but from your extensive research, do you believe that that's enough, that you can just go on with good intentions, or do you need something more?
Well, absolutely. I think that people are achieving anything they set their mind to. But I certainly took an unconventional route. I do not have a science degree.
Right. It
is something that I've studied passionately all my life, and had a lot of opportunities that I was very fortunate to have. There are very few scientists that are willing to become involved in the field of cryptozoology for obvious reasons. They're prone to a lot of criticism from their peers, that puts them in sometimes an uncomfortable standing in their position. There are things like grants and other things. So, it is a very controversial subject matter, and a lot of these claims are quite extraordinary. So, in that sense, that there are a few brave scientists who ventured to become involved, but certainly the bulk of research, if you're specifically referring to something that is in the common consciousness, like Bigfoot, is done by laymen and people that are just very passionate about the research. Many of them have had experiences, and so they're very convinced, that these are real and that it has to be proven.
Well, let me ask you on a personal note, as you get more noticed and your name gets out there more and more, do these scientific groups or even insider groups secretly or quietly approach you and say, yes, you're onto something? And if they do, is that as far as they can take it, or will there ever be a full-fledged backing into cryptozoology, in your opinion, ever?
Well, I have something I say all the time, which is, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
Yes. And,
it's very difficult for most people to believe that it's possible that something like Bigfoot, a man-like, presumably primitive man-like creature, enormous, hairy, could elude us, and particularly in, a continent like North America, which we perceive as being so heavily populated. The standard for scientific classification has been a type specimen, or a body that can be physically analyzed, cataloged, and so forth. So,
right.
It's unfortunate when you're talking about something like Bigfoot, which could actually be very human-like. We don't know to think in those terms. But in this day and age, photographic evidence has lost a lot of its validity. So, that's what it comes down to: is there has to be strong physical evidence to prove some of these things. But I think that's possible. I think that there are enough of these things out there that, obviously people are seeing them enough that eventually, maybe someone might wander up on one that had passed or something. Sorry?
Hello, Kenny, you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, it seems like we're having a bit of technical issues here. Just bear with us. He may be on a cell phone and just out of range, but hopefully we'll get him back.
Hello?
Hello, Ken, are you there still?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can just barely hear you. You're cutting in and out.
Okay, I'm on a landline. I can call you back if I like. If you like.
Okay. Worst case scenario, Ken, if you can hear me, if you can hang up and call right back in, maybe it'll revamp the line a little bit stronger.
Okay, will do.
Gotta try. I did hear you just now, but it's very choppy. So if we can, just let's try that.
Okay, will do.
Just bear with us, listeners, for a moment. Okay. As I was saying at the top of the show, I hope everyone has a safe and happy July 4th tomorrow, and for all the Canadians, it's another regular Sunday, but have a great Sunday as well. Weather up here in Toronto, Canada is prime summer weather. It's hot, it's humid, and there's a lot of stuff going on around the world. And, it all starts with having the right intention and good positive mindset, and we can have a great day. And okay, we're going to try and bring Ken back in. Hello, Ken, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, it's still a little bit choppy, but I'm wondering if is there a storm down in your area tonight?
No, not at all. We did have a storm here the past few days, but it's pretty much cleared out. Yeah,
I can barely hear you now. All of a sudden, it's cutting in quite badly. Jeez. Well, let's keep trying, and we'll see if we can fix this. If there's a lot of static in the air, it affects phone lines and stuff. So. I really appreciate your patience, Ken, and thank you very much for that. And, these kind of things do happen, and sometimes it's out of control. Lydia's saying she can hear you crystal clear, so maybe it's just on my end. If we can continue this, maybe
I can hear you fine, so if you want to keep going.
I'll go through. Okay, let me just ask the chat room if it's still clear. And see what they say. They're saying yes. How about from Ken's end? Can you hear Ken clear?
I can hear you clear.
Okay. Well, we'll try to improvise this if we can. If they can hear you, possibly it might be just an issue with the Blog Talk server itself. Yes, they're asking if you can talk, if you can say something.
Yeah. Let's see.
Okay.
What was the last subject?
They're saying that it's all good from their end. So I'll just kind of blindly ask a question and see what happens with it. I really wanted to ask you about the big bird phenomenon and sightings. That's something that kind of appeals me because my daughter absolutely loves pterodactyls, and they really do resemble a pterodactyl in a lot of ways. Is that what those are, in your opinion?
Well, big bird, which is something I wrote about in my first book, is a name that was given to a number of mysterious flying creatures here in South Texas. Particularly back in the 1970s, these were very noteworthy and made headlines around the world, but we still hear about them in modern times. I still collect reports, receive reports of sightings all the time, but there's somewhat of a variation in reports in that you have people that report large raptor types of birds, the traditional thunderbirds that we know of from Native American legend, which are described as just being very enormous, almost airplane-sized vulture or eagle, raptor types of birds, usually with a dark coloration. And then I have received, however, a number of reports from people who claim that they've seen something that looks much more similar to the prehistoric reptiles known as pterosaurs. And of course, these included the pterodactyls and earlier groups such as the rhamphorhynchoids, which had a very long snake-like tail. And this is what many people have reported to me. So there seems to be a case of composite identity with regards to Big Bird, in that it's a name which is inclusive of lots of different experiences and encounters that people have had with essentially big, scary flying things here in Texas.
And there's been actual cases, much like the Mothman legend, where people have actually been swooped up and taken away. Have you found any information to further confirm that report, or is that just mere speculation?
Well, it's really interesting. These are types of sightings are on the fringe of cryptozoology research, but we do occasionally have reports of things like Mothman and essentially anthropomorphic beings that are a mixture of human or humanoid and bird-like or dragon-like or gargoyle-like features. And we really don't know what to make of these from a scientific perspective, because they just don't belong anywhere in our zoology books. But for example, the most recent spate of sightings was probably about a year ago in northern Mexico. In particular, in the Chihuahua district of Mexico, there was a college student who claimed that he was driving down a lonely road one night, and he saw this black shape by the side of the road, and suddenly it unfurled its wings, and it was this horrible, winged Batman, essentially, with leathery wings and a horrible face, and that it chased him in his car. So it was very similar to some of the early Mothman reports in that sense. And in fact, I was involved in a Monster Quest episode, Terror from the Sky, where I went down to Mexico and investigated some reports of flying humanoid creatures that have been reported around Monterrey and other parts of Mexico.
And is there any possible connection between Hollow Earth and these beings? And if there is, could there be a whole, whack of animal life underneath the Earth that seems to make its appearance every now and then to let us know, that things are going on down there?
Well, I mean, that's certainly one theory that's been out there a while, and of course Charles Fort, one of the great forefathers of our of anomalous research, kind of put that theory out there. Wherever you want to speculate these things could be from, inner Earth, extraterrestrial, other dimensional. I mean, there's so many theories out there, and really none of them are provable at this point. But the fact remains that people do, on a semi-regular basis, report encounters with, bird people and lizard people and goat men and things, creatures that essentially, again, don't belong anywhere in the realm of zoology. So it's, there's certainly something to it. Whether we can consider it something that is traditional cryptozoology, a lot of cryptozoologists shun that type of research because they feel that it brings even more criticism to the field. I mean, these are really extraordinary claims that people are making.
And what about the Chupacabra phenomenon? Is that on a decline, or is it always at the same point for reportings and cases?
Well, again, the Chupacabra, much like Big Bird, is a case of composite identity because it's a name that refers to, several different types of creatures or mysterious animals that have been documented and reported in other, different parts of Puerto Rico, the Americas, here in Texas, South America, and so forth. The Chupacabras that I've studied here in Texas, are essentially mysterious canids or dog-like animals that are very abnormal. They seem to be completely hairless, strange bluish-gray coloration, typically long fangs, weird dentition, abnormal limbs, and other deformities. So the notion that they're blood drinkers is a folklore or legend, but has not been really proven, and there's not really a lot of scientific foundation to that theory. But that's sort of the reputation that they've gotten. They're certainly very scary looking.
Yes, indeed. And can they be easily classed as mangy coyotes? Because I've seen so many reportings and documentary films where that's the easy answer they give. Does that satisfy you, or does that upset you?
Well, it doesn't upset me, but as I mentioned in my new book, Monsters of Texas, I wrote a chapter on the Texas Chupacabras and documented the whole history of what happened here. I don't think that you can easily make that dismissal, and I understand where people are coming from. I mean, certainly we know from DNA testing that several of the animals that have been found contain coyote DNA, but in some there's other canid DNA, such as wolf and domestic dogs, so some of them may be hybrids. Mange is obviously a condition that causes an animal's hair to fall out. There have been extreme cases of mange, but many of the veterinary experts and other people that I've talked to have never seen or dealt with cases that are as extreme as these, where the animal is virtually hairless. So we're looking into the possibility now that there could be a genetic component to this as well, and there may be a relationship there to a certain type of mange, for example, demodectic mange, which may become genetic or a genetic condition. So there's a lot of different possibilities, but the interesting thing is that these animals are really starting to become more and more common here in Texas. So they're obviously breeding. If it was a mutation, it's a successful mutation.
That's right. That's a very good point. And as you said, if it's a successful mutation, it definitely will make the species stronger.
Well, there may be reasons for this that we don't quite understand. In light of the terrible tragedy that's going on right now with the oil spill,
yes.
We really have to look at man's impact in the environment, and the terrible possibility that our mistreatment of our resources and our planet have in some ways led to some of these ecological catastrophes.
That's a very good point as well. And you actually wrote a great blog on the Gulf sea serpents that might be extremely decimated or even completely eliminated by this spill. And I think that's something we should speak on a bit if you can.
Well, it really, in the bigger picture, it really saddens me that so many remarkable animal species have become extinct, essentially as a result of man, either hunted to extinction or, in many cases, exposed to, things like the oil spill. One of my good friends and research partners, Lee Hales, is, he's appeared with me in some monster hunting episodes, and is more of a traditional zoologist with a keen interest in cryptozoology, but he's actually been very active in the reconnaissance down there, working to help protect wildlife. And he told me a great story the other day about finding a little island that contains some rare shoebill birds, and he was able to put a barricade around it or have one built. So there are efforts being made, but I guess my bigger point there in that blog was that there may be some things under the ocean, really amazing animals, something similar to sea serpents, which have been reported for centuries, and they're just probably extremely endangered at this point, to the point where something like this could be the final chapter for those types of animals that we sadly may never know that if they existed or not.
That's right, and that's another extremely important point. And if I can ask you, when you get approached to do a TV show, do they give you an open platform to speak of your opinions and research, or do they sort of break it down to point A to point B and nothing in between?
Well, I think it's quite balanced, actually. Typically when these shows are being put together, the people that are putting them together may have a little knowledge, but they're putting a lot of trust in the researchers that are part of the show to sort of point them in the right directions as far as what is really valid and real in terms of the research that's being done and any evidence that's out there and so forth. So, but on the other hand, it is television, And the ultimate goal of any television show is to keep people entertained for 46 minutes or whatever the runtime would be without commercials, and keep people's interest. So they have to tell a story. They have to present a lot of different interesting aspects, and keep the action moving along. So we do some investigations in the course of these shows, but there's also a very tight timeline as far as the workers and the crew and budgets and things that have to be accomplished. So it's certainly not an ideal situation as far as us going out there and having weeks to do our thing and all the right equipment and resources. So it's a bit of a challenge, but I think in the big picture it's real important to open people's minds to cryptozoology and to raise public awareness. So in that sense, I think it's a very good thing.
Absolutely. And is there any particular part of cryptozoology, or even a monster that you know of that the public doesn't know of, and you think or it should or it needs to have a little bit of TV play to get awareness of it?
Well, if you want to pick something a little bit more mundane, I mean, there's certain proclamations that are made throughout North America from time to time by wildlife departments and forestry services and so forth, that animal species have become extinct, and a lot of times there's a lot of evidence to indicate that, but it's not conclusive. And for example, here in North America, we have the ivory-billed woodpecker, which is there are two species of woodpeckers, and the one that people are familiar with now is the pileated woodpecker, which is very common. But the ivory-billed was believed to become extinct in 1937 or 38, I believe, sometime in the 30s. But recently, in recent years, there have been reports of people seeing them in deep bottomland areas in North America. So they certainly may have survived their presumed extinction. So, I mean, you would hope that there are animals out there like that may not be as exotic as Bigfoot or the Chupacabra, that that we can protect and save and somehow aid in bringing back a healthy population, so we don't lose an animal species forever. So, I mean, in that sense, cryptozoology could help preserve lands, or hopefully to raise awareness and raise efforts to protect these animals and to prove that they're still there, so they are protected.
That's a great point. And let me ask you this. If there ever was a Bigfoot either caught or most likely it's going to be shot and killed, depending on the persons that encounter it, do you think that with confirmation of the species, will there be sort of a dwindle effect for the rest of cryptozoology, or do you think it will open as many doors as possible?
Well, I think something like that would be, even if, unfortunately, if it happened, in an unfortunate way, like an animal being shot, but, it would obviously be a monumental moment in human discovery, that here we have this, what I believe to be, a very close relative, to what we are, in terms of being, in the genus Homo. And I think that it would also create a lot of problems, unfortunately, just because the government and the other powers that be may not know how to handle something like that. Right. That if people suddenly knew that these things were out there in the woods, just beyond the shadows, that would change maybe the way that we view going into the woods and so forth. So, ultimately, most of us that are involved in wildlife research are conservationists, and we would love to see land protected and put aside and not further abused or deforested. So, and I think Bigfoot would be sort of I guess the saving grace in that type of movement, because it is such a amazing creature. And it certainly would need habitat, particularly if it's endangered, to continue to exist. So I think something like that would also open other doors in cryptozoology, to get back to your question. Sorry to meander off there, but yeah, no, absolutely, because, at that point then, there may be Bigfoot-type creatures all over the world. I mean, it's a global phenomenon, so other governments could become involved in similar movements and so forth, and hopefully more research would be done.
Well, I know you must be asked this almost every single time, but for the skeptics out there, why do you think many of these creatures, including Bigfoot, are not found? And I'm sure you've heard this question a million times too. Why is there no fecal matter or bones from a deceased Bigfoot? There's the well-known footprints and kind of structures that some of them claim they found. People found with almost like a dent sort of thing. But where's the hair fibers and that sort of thing? The hard evidence, as you described earlier. How come that doesn't seem to be found in any of these cases?
Well, those are always good, sound questions, and I definitely appreciate the skeptical or even critical view of what we do, because it is, again, it's very beyond the pale. The suggestion to me that Bigfoot is either just a mass hoax or mass hallucination is far more improbable than the alternative, which is simply that a highly intelligent and elusive animal species continues to remain undetected, by science. Amazing new animal species are still being discovered all the time at really an alarm, a rate that people would not believe. Now, granted, a lot of these are invertebrates and insects and so forth, but it seems like every year now that there's a fairly good-sized mammal that's discovered somewhere on the planet. But what I would say to most skeptics or people that don't really believe there's anything to it, they haven't read extensively on the subject. They probably haven't looked at all the evidence that I and other researchers have had access to. They've probably never spent a significant amount of time in the woods at night in an area where Bigfoot has been active. And, I definitely don't think they've looked into the eyes of someone who's had a close-up Bigfoot encounter to see the kind of traumatic impact that it's had on them. The reason that we don't have a body, that's the thing that's really frustrating. And we have had, apparently hair samples. We've got some really good track castings, which have strong biological evidence. But we need a body, and that's what's going to prove it conclusively. But what's interesting about that is that perhaps some bodies have been either found, or I know that some of these Bigfoot-type creatures were, killed in Asia back in the 20th century, some of them during wartime situations, and, there's a famous account of one being captured by the Russian army. And of course, unfortunately, it always seems to be in an opportune time, for example, in the middle of a war or something, so... and who knows, perhaps somewhere in North America, one was shot by a hunter by accident, and, when he saw how human it looked, he, thought he might have committed murder, or, he was afraid to get in trouble, or such a scenario is not totally impossible, so, I think ultimately one will be found, hopefully one that's passed of natural causes. It's my own personal belief that, there may be one actually road-killed at some point, as horrible as that sounds. If you think about the trucks and vehicles that are going into these areas where, which have previously been uninhabited, and they have been seen around roads and crossing roads and so forth, so.
Well, here's a sort of, I guess we could call it like an alternate reality type question. Could it be possible that Bigfoot itself might be a byproduct of the fabled Nephilim story?
There are a lot of theories about Bigfoot that are sort of on the fringe, and most Bigfoot researchers that are pretty involved in it believe, based on the physical evidence, that it's simply a relative or ancestor of humans or Homo sapiens,
right?
Or some type of prehistoric primate like Gigantopithecus. There are, of course, theories, and people have made statements and claims that Bigfoot is something more of a paranormal nature, and there are surprisingly a number of accounts that contain elements like this, where Bigfoot has vanished in front of people's eyes or turned invisible. John Downs from the Center of Fortean Zoology had a Bigfoot sighting in England, and he claimed it looked two-dimensional, that it just didn't look completely real, but it looked like what it was supposed to look like and was somewhat animated. So There are theories about, psychic projection. I mean, do we create these things with our minds? Are they interdimensional? I mean, extraterrestrial. I mean, I'm certainly open-minded to any possibility because nothing's been proven. And I also believe that virtually anything is possible, and even things that we can't even comprehend. So, but in the big picture, I would say there's a lot of physical evidence which would indicate that Bigfoot is merely a surviving hominid, from the Miocene or millions of years ago that somehow has remained around and adapted and avoided detection by man. And that's certainly a remarkable claim, but there's a lot of evidence to support that.
Yep, you're absolutely right. And as a matter of fact, another relative of ours, the mountain gorilla, I'm sure you're aware of this, they found thousands of them congregating in a forest field not too long ago, and it blew scientists away. They just didn't know that there was that many of them, and they've never seen that before. So anything is possible.
Absolutely.
And let me ask you, what is your personal favorite from researching like all of these monsters and creatures? Is there one that really stands out to you and you feel connected to the most?
Oh, wow, that's tough to say. I tend to immerse myself with a great deal of passion when I become involved in any investigation. I would say, of course, Big Bird, I guess, to some respect, because it's a cryptid, and for those who aren't familiar with the term, cryptid is essentially what we use to describe a creature that is researched in cryptozoology. Big Bird and Thunderbirds in general have not really been researched that much. It's really an enigma because you would expect if there was something that large out there that was flying around that they would be seen a lot more often. So that raises a lot of questions, and there's not nearly as much evidence as there is, say, for Bigfoot. I mean, there's really no physical evidence, very little photographic evidence, and so forth. So, but I think the fact that when I became involved in the Big Bird research, it was kind of ancient history at that time, and I was able to fortunately bring enough notoriety to my book and some of the reports that have come out of South Texas that a number of other people have come forward. And so, I mean, it's really kind of raised the bar as far as, maybe there are a lot more of these sightings out there than we could possibly realize. And considering there's a heavy ridicule factor with these types of encounters, people that have seen these things have told me that, even their family, wanted to believe them, but they just thought it was so unbelievable. But these people, when I talk to them, I mean, they're very convincing. I mean, you can definitely sense that there's an emotional impact from one of these types of encounters. So, I'm hoping that my continued, efforts to raise awareness about big birds and unusual flying creatures will hopefully, bring more of a focus to that particular area.
That's a great answer. Let me ask you on the flip side of that, though, is there any sort of particular cryptid or species that you really feel is not valid in any way, and is merely urban myth or a total waste of time, in your opinion?
Well, it really pains me to say this, and hopefully it doesn't rub anybody the wrong way, but I think the Jersey Devil is one that may be primarily, a really fascinating legend that grew out of an area and became ingrained in part of the culture. There may be certainly some unexplained experiences or encounters with something unusual that added to the folklore and mythology, but there's just such a variety of descriptions. There's not a lot of really sound recent reports that I'm aware of, right. And I'm not saying there couldn't be something there, because again, I'm open-minded to the possibility, but I just think the overall image that people have of the Jersey Devil, of this sort of demonic winged horse-like thing, with a dragon's tail, I think it really is a little bit over the top. And there's probably something a little bit more mundane that might explain some of those types of reports.
Right. And is there anything that you feel, like I was saying before, is not getting enough coverage? Like, for example, werewolves. Do you feel that certain stories are being pushed back, and they could be, almost missed and forgotten in some ways?
Well, they could certainly get a stigma, and I guess werewolf is a good example because there have been, in addition to legends that have gone on for hundreds and thousands of years in different cultures, including Native American cultures, there have been, claims and reports, made in recent years in parts of North America of creatures that essentially just, resemble werewolves, bipedal, dog-like animals, again, anthropomorphic, to use that word, a blend of human and animal characteristics. Now, if something like this does exist, it's, again, it creates a lot of problems in terms of evolution and classification. So we would have to look at it in another sense, that there could certainly be something behind it. But again, it could have something more to do with, the supernatural or paranormal world. That doesn't, and I don't mean to say that they may not be physical or take on physical attributes at times, because they certainly do seem physical and real to people. But as far as their origin goes, it's nothing that we might be able to actually prove scientifically. Now, I have two interesting theories myself on werewolves, if you'd like to hear them. One is that in some cases that people could be actually seeing Bigfoot, and that in fact there may be certain types of Bigfoot creatures, perhaps subspecies or individual specimens that have sort of an elongated jaw or a longer type of face, and perhaps also pronounced pointy ears. And to back this up, I've actually collected several Bigfoot reports from certain specific areas around North America where people have described them as looking like that, as having almost like more of a muzzle type of face. So, I mean, if there is a variation of Bigfoot that looked like that it might look a little bit more bestial and more, more like a canid from certain angles, if people are only getting a fleeting glimpse.
Could that be, sorry to interrupt, could that be one of the reported animals seen at the Skinwalker's Ranch? Because that was supposed to be an absolutely enormous werewolf.
Yeah, and some of the sightings at the Skinwalker Ranch in Utah have resembled to some extent classic werewolves, but at other times Bigfoot-type creatures. There seems to be a menagerie of different types of unexplained creatures in that particular location. Utah is certainly within the normally accepted range of Bigfoot-type creatures, with the highest concentration being in the Pacific Northwest and also in the Rocky Mountains and so forth. So that is certainly a possibility, I think. The other thing I was going to say about werewolves, and this is actually a theory that Linda Godfrey, who's written several good books about the American werewolf sightings, she's brought up the amphicyonids. Let me see if I get this right. It's been a while since I pronounced this one. Amphicyonids. Amphicyonids. That's it. That's a mouthful. These were like primitive bear dogs. They looked very similar to wolves, but they were much larger and more ferocious, and they lived millions of years ago, we know from the fossil records. But if something like that had survived into modern times, that was even bigger and nastier and scarier than any wolf that we'd ever seen, that could possibly explain some werewolf legends and reports.
Absolutely. And what's your stance on vampires? Because this aligns with the whole Twilight craze that's going on. Do you follow the vampire lore, or do you think that that's exactly what it is?
Well, essentially, vampires have never really found their way into cryptozoology or any other real modern type of research that I'm aware of. Now, I know there's a lot of people that would argue with me and beg to differ, because like werewolves, we do have vampire legends that have dated back centuries in so many different cultures, and often where there's smoke, there's fire. So, but I've never really done any amount of research really into vampirism and some of those reports, I feel that the notion of vampirism is so ingrained in our culture and such a big part of who we are as humans for whatever reason, that even before Twilight, I mean, you've had all types of vampire crazes where there were movies and TV shows and Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and it just seems to be a recurring cycle. And in that sense, the Chupacabra, even, the whole notion, I think, of or part of the Chupacabra that people really love is the notion that it is sort of a blood-drinking creature that creeps in the night and drains the blood of these, hapless victims. And, so in that sense, it's become sort of a modern vampire in many respects.
That's exactly what I was going to sort of ask you, and it's like you read my mind. What about other areas? I know you mentioned the paranormal. Like, could there be new additions, such as the shadow person? The reported cases are quite high around the United States, especially, and some in England and Canada as well. Could that be a new class all on its own, or do you think again that that should stay within the paranormal spectrum?
Yeah, well, a good point. I mean, there's a lot of gray areas in anomalous research, and for example, I specifically specialize in cryptozoology, which I consider to be more based on, the doctrines and methodologies of zoology and also the classification systems and what we know about our natural history. Inevitably, there are other creatures that are reported, and these, may in fact be part of our natural world too, but just not in a way we understand. But, I think, and I've been involved to some extent with some paranormal research and also UFO studies and stuff over the last few years, mainly because I was curious whether there could be a relationship or relationships between some of these fringe creatures that people report. But, I think that there's really no sound pattern or, way to really go out and do the adequate research it would take to prove whether these things are real or not.
Right.
In many respects, you're looking for a needle in a haystack, and you use a very good metaphor there in the shadow people or shadow creatures, because I mean, if they're in the shadows, then they're not physical, they're amorphous, and then how do we prove something like that is part of our natural world and is got a basis in biology and physicality. So. But I'm open to the concept of interdimensional, and some people say extraterrestrial, but just the possibility that there could be other planes and levels and dimensions of existence that are real and physical, and that sometimes the wires get crossed.
And that's a great point. And in that regard, do you feel that the entire anomalous studies, as you just mentioned, needs to be opened up with no borders and just include almost everything and almost anything, or do you feel that there has to be guidelines and almost categories as there is now?
Well, Jason, that would be such a difficult thing, I think, to draw up and to execute. I would say that there are people that probably specialize to some degree in all of these different fields, but it's very difficult to spread one's time around enough, I think, to cover that many topics and bases. There are a lot of alliances that are being drawn, and for whatever reason, cryptozoology seems to really interest people that are also interested in the paranormal and UFOs and vice versa. So I've been very fortunate to meet some really impressive and very respectable researchers in both the fields of UFO and the paranormal over the last few years, and they're interested in what I'm doing. I'm interested in what they're doing. You and I are networking. I mean, it's just it's an ongoing process where people are exchanging information, and that's one of the things that we need to make any type of advancement in anomalous research, is to share our information and our research with our colleagues and compare notes and see if, at some point someone or some of us can start to find patterns and detect things that can actually be tested or possibly used as evidence.
That's such a great point and statement, and a perfect segue to, because your newest book is it's Monsters of Texas, and you co-wrote it with Nick Redfern, and he's another great person, and I've had him on my show, and he does do some UFO research, as you just mentioned, and a lot of the similar stuff that you do as well. If you could tell the people how you got inspired to do this book, and is it your personal favorite out of the ones that you've done?
Well, thanks for the plug. I definitely want to talk about my new book because I am excited about it. Nick Redfern, of course, is a best-selling author who's written about a number of topics, UFOs, conspiracies, celebrity scandals. He's written a lot of good cryptozoology books, including Three Men Seeking Monsters, which is kind of becoming a cult classic. And Nick has been a friend of mine for several years now, and we've gotten very close. We're kindred spirits in many ways. And he's a transplanted Brit living here in Dallas, which is kind of funny in itself. And Nick is quite a character for people that don't know him. He's kind of comes from a punk music background, so he's kind of got this punk thing going on, but he's also, a super intellectual, and he's just, so knowledgeable about so many different subjects. But Nick and I were having some margaritas down here on the Riverwalk in San Antonio one night, which is something we do down here in San Antonio, and somehow the idea came up, that we should write a book together. And, I'd just written Big Bird, and, he's involved in so many different things as far as research and collecting reports, and so am I. So we decided to tackle the state of Texas, and we had investigated the Lake Worth Goat Man together at one point, and some other things. So we thought, well, there's certainly a lot. It's a big state. There have been a lot of different types of monster reports. So it's taken us 3 years to kind of put the book together, and we may have been researching before that. But we did a chapter on Big Bird, and I did a lot of recent reports that I've collected since my original book came out. So. A lot of these have never been published or read before. We did a chapter on werewolves in Texas, which, believe it or not, there are quite a few reports and legends. Of course, Bigfoot in Texas. We did a pretty thorough chapter on the Chupacabras, which, talks about and explains the whole history of what's happened here in Texas with these weird blue canids. And just a menagerie of different types of creatures. And, some of them more, fabulous, similar to Mothman, Gargoyles. We have some really interesting legends in and around Texas, the Donkey Lady and Lechusa, and so there's a little bit of everything in there. And we even did a chapter on out-of-place animals, which there are, because Texas is a big state and people like to bring in exotic animals, so occasionally people will encounter all kinds of really unusual creatures out in the woods. So a little bit of everything in the book, and for anyone that's interested in cryptozoology, I think they would really enjoy it.
Absolutely, and if we can also give your website out too, that way people can, check out your site and see the stuff that you're speaking about.
Yeah, absolutely. My website is kengerhard.com. Simple as that. Ken Gerhard is Gerhard, and it's a blog, and I welcome people to come in and post comments. I have not been as active on there recently as I would like to, because I'm involved in so many projects right now. But I do try to get on there and check my posts, and a couple times a month I go up and put up a new topic or what's new, what's going on with my research and so forth. So.
Well, let me ask you on a side note here. Have you ever encountered stories of living dinosaurs, like raptor-type creatures or, Gallimimus-type creatures, that sort of thing?
Well, as a matter of fact, that's something we write about, or I wrote about briefly in the new Monsters of Texas book. Because in West Texas, in the desert area around Big Bend National Park, there's a belief that there are these dinosaur-like creatures running around known as the mountain boomers. And they've been described as looking very much like velociraptor, bipedal types of dinosaur, man-sized or bigger. feasting on roadkill and running across the road and so forth. And of course, Big Bend is a very amazing area as far as the scenery. It's extremely uninhabited and inhospitable to man. So, I'm not saying they're out there, but it's as good a place as any. So that's something from my own personal experience. And of course, there are dinosaur reports that have been coming out of Africa and parts of Asia for, and when I say dinosaur, I say something that looks or resembles a dinosaur. The most famous of these would be Mokele Mbembe, which has been, reported from the inner areas of the Congo, areas that are extremely uninhabited and very difficult to get to. So they're just, the attempts that have been made to go out there and look for evidence have been very difficult.
Well, the reason why I asked this is because I mentioned it to Nick, and it still boggles my mind to this day. But in a nutshell, I used to do security at an old power plant here in Toronto, and I needed to use a golf cart to do the tour. That's how large the premise was. And in this premise, there was a massive amount of wild rabbits, perfect predator feeding ground. And there was coyotes that I saw, and wolves, and wild dogs, and that sort of thing. But one particular day, broad daylight too, so it wasn't like it was poorly lit or whatever. But a rabbit scooted out in front of the pathway that I was going, and I heard rustling in the grass, and all of a sudden this orange and black, almost like a tiger stripe looking creature came in front of my cart. It looked the direction I was in, or coming from. It kind of stood there for a split second, did a 180, and ran back the direction it went, that it came out of. And I got off the cart, and I followed the direction that I saw it going to, and it was like a hole in the wall. But the building was severely condemned, and they told us not to go inside of it. So that's as far as I got. But I might be going nuts, even to this day. But I am absolutely positive I saw something that looked like, a miniaturized raptor. That's the best way to describe it. And I hope I'm not crazy. In other words.
Well, I speak to people all the time that have had experiences that are quite remarkable and unbelievable, but they're very real to them, and I don't disbelieve that anything is possible. Now, Canada, of course, would be a very curious environment because I don't know if reptiles are all that suited, but who am I to say what can and can't exist? So I certainly believe you saw what you think you saw. Why was it there? I mean, who knows? That could be a whole other show.
Yeah, exactly. And I did mention it quickly to the lady that worked, the secretary in the office, and she said that they used to do a lot of weird experiments at this particular site, and there was weird hybrid animals that she encountered. So you never know, It could be
that's
like
a good point.
A real.
There's a lot of conspiracy theories about what our governments and different, secret organizations might be up to, and who knows.
That's right. Well, let me ask you what your upcoming plans are. You mentioned that you have a ton of projects upcoming. Are there new books, TV shows, appearances, and that type of thing?
Well, I haven't really had a chance to start on a new book, but it's something that's in the back of my mind. It seems to take me so long to finish one that I figured I better get started right away. I do have some TV projects coming up. They're kind of at a stage, though, where I probably can't divulge too much information right now, just because they're kind of being developed and put together. But there is one that I'll mention that I'm hoping is going to air very soon, and it's called Ultimate Proof. And it's going to be on True TV, which is kind of cool for me because I've never had a show on True TV. But for that particular show, they essentially had me and some top paranormal experts and also some UFO experts come in and analyze different videotapes, many of them gleaned off of YouTube and other public forums that people had of anomalous occurrences. And basically, they just wanted us to have commentary, whether we thought they could be fake, real, what was behind it, and so forth. But that was actually a lot of fun for me because I covered a number of Bigfoot videos and things that have been put out there for a while. But they also let me dabble with some of the UFO and paranormal stuff, and I got to pick some other people's brains. So that's ultimate proof on True TV, and I guess people will just have to keep watching the listings, but I imagine it's going to be up sometime this summer.
That's absolutely awesome, and I never did get a chance to ask you, what is your stance on the UFO phenomenon? Are you a believer or sort of undecided?
Well, I think undoubtedly there are UFOs. I mean, in the broad term, unidentified flying object, I mean, those have been reported by probably the highest percentage of the population. I mean, virtually everybody knows somebody or knows of somebody who has seen something, that they can't identify flying around in the sky. As far as what it could be, certainly in some cases I think we could be talking about black ops, government experiments and so forth. Some of them could be certainly natural phenomenon that we don't quite understand. And then there's another category that, is really out there, which is that, we could in fact be getting visits from, non-human entities from, Lord knows where. I mean, they're coming here, they're doing their thing, and, much like if I assume humans, if we had the technology to explore other worlds and dimensions, that we would go out there and look and see what's going on there too. So there's a lot of evidence, and there's probably a lot of evidence that certain governments have suppressed, for years and years. So the fact that the government takes such an interest in the subject would seem to indicate to me that there's definitely something going on that we may not know about or may not be, yet ready to grasp.
Exactly, and I know outside of cryptozoology and all of this, you have some bands that you participate in. Is that how you relax and sort of step away from this, or do you have other? I know you're an outdoorsman as well, but do you have other things that just clear your mind and bring you to ease?
Well, I don't really do much of the music anymore. That was certainly a life passion for me for about 15 or 20 years, and I was pretty involved in that on an everyday basis. I certainly I still do music sometimes as a hobby, but moreover I have other escapes. For example, I like to sometimes just veg out like most people, and just watch some ridiculous show that might take me in a direction that I might not otherwise think about taking. I enjoy going out now and to different social events and just meeting people, because there's so many fascinating people out there in the world with so many great stories and interesting perspectives, and it's just always really exciting to me to go out and to a situation where I can meet people and ultimately they want to talk a little bit about what I'm into, because I think it is a little bit unusual for most people, and I don't mind talking about it at all. But that's pretty much it. I mean, actually, I find myself very blessed and very lucky to be doing some of the things I am doing. So I love the travel, and I love sometimes tagging along on a ghost hunt or doing something that I may not be consider myself to be really an expert in, but it's just the experience. And seeing what people experience and how they feel and react to these different types of things.
Well, I know your good buddy there, Nick, has some other venues that he writes for. And do you have any guilty pleasures that you would secretly write about, or have thought about secretly writing about?
Oh gosh, I can't really say that anything really springs to mind. I've always been interested in the the horror genre in terms of I'm a big buff and love some of the particularly the old school horror movies and sci-fi movies, and I love reading old Stephen King books and Edgar Allan Poe and stuff like that. So I think it would be fun at some point someday to maybe be involved on some level with a either a horror film, even if it's a low budget type thing or something, just because I have so much of a love for the genre. On the other hand, I keep that reality very separate from what I do with my research, because I know that I am looking for evidence of so-called real monsters. And, you know, I certainly don't want to jeopardize my credibility by people thinking that I'm looking to create things that aren't there, because I do approach things from a very skeptical point of view, and have many times have debunked things or found things to be totally unbelievable. So, but I think that would be fun. You know, even maybe scoring or writing some music, you know, a soundtrack to a scary movie, I think would be kind of cool.
Well, I got to tell you, this hour, I know we had that minor tech issue, but what a discussion. I can't thank you enough, Ken, and it's been an absolute honor to speak to you, and well worth the wait, and I really appreciate you coming on tonight, and it's been an absolute joy in more ways than I can say, and I would love to have you back, you know, when these projects come up and you got time, think about a return visit if you would, because it would be equally as pleasurable to have you back.
Well, thank you, Jason. I appreciate your kind words, and may I say that you've been a most gracious host, and I think you're excellent, had some excellent questions and points, and I would love to come back on sometime. So, you know, let's definitely stay in touch, and sometime in the near future we need to do this again.
We'll do it for sure, and, you know, we possibly can have both you and Nick, and we'll have a sort of roundtable discussion, you know, and just speak about anything and everything if we can.
That sounds like a blast.
All right, sir. You have yourself a great night, and happy July 4th to you.
Okay. You too, Jason, and thanks to everyone who listened, and I wish everyone a very safe and very fun holiday weekend.
That's right. Take care, and we'll talk very soon, sir.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Good night. What an incredible guest, and an absolute pleasurable conversation. Again, I apologize for that minor tech issue. It may not be heard on the replay, but during the live show there was a little bit of static, and at some points it was quite hard to hear, but it was all worth it, and I can't thank Ken enough. What a great guy, and an awesome conversation in my opinion. So I hope everyone could join me for my next show, and I just want to give the quick shout-outs and hellos to the Facebook group, everybody on YouTube, here on Blog Talk Radio. Thanks for the support, and the Twitters and MySpacers. I know I haven't been spending much time over there on MySpace, but I think I'll try in the next little while to spend more time there. And everyone have a safe and happy holiday weekend, and we'll talk very soon. Take care.
You know my world, this is my right. You can take my love.